Chapter 221. Mostly Intact Manor. The library was naturally the first place that Alexis went, and found that the room was nearly untouched by time and undamaged, except for one large brazier in the middle of the room, where a number of books had been burned before the door was locked. The effect had actually preserved the library itself, as it had kept the initial moisture out of the room, and the windowless library was sealed against the elements. She could feel that there was also magic in place over the room, but Alexis couldn't tell what sort of spell it might have been. All that mattered was that the books were all right. A quick examination of gaps in shelves and a few unburnt portions of the books in the brazier revealed that it was the household bookkeeping for the most recent years before the war. Whoever had set the fire had been destroying anything that could be used as a content listing by thieves or evidence of assets and income by enemy nobles who might put survivors on trial. The Dago soldiers never got the chance to fully ransack the building. At most, they had caused minor damages and grabbed a few convenient valuables when they captured the residents after the main battle in the courtyard. Even most of the statues and ornamental items remained in the alcoves of the main hall. Now that she was certain that the books were secure, Alexis moved from the library to the study. It had also been locked tight and left untouched, but the floor outside showed signs that a body had been dragged from here. The blood still stained the wood of the floor. Inside, the study was absolutely destroyed. Furniture had been hacked apart, deep claw marks had gouged the walls and torn the bookshelves apart, destroying many ancient tomes. But the most telling sign of battle was one mummified maid, still in her uniform, with draconic claws extending from her fingertips, but dozens of wounds on her body. Long dried blood turned the entire floor to russet brown, but Alexis gave a grim smile as she noticed that the maid had died sitting on an ornate wooden chair, arms placed on her lap, like a queen overseeing her realm. Which meant that the remainder of the blood should have come from Dago soldiers, or whoever had fought alongside her in this room, before the door was closed and locked. A faint breeze from somewhere caused the door to creak, and Alexis turned to find that there was a small fireplace in the corner, hidden under rubble from a destroyed cabinet. That must have been what pushed the door closed. Alexis closed and locked the study door, and then took a piece of chalk from her storage ring and marked it with an X to keep others out. The smoking room revealed nothing but a charred carpet, where a discarded cigar had fallen in someone's haste to join the battle. No other door on the main floor was locked, though the main office's door had been kicked in at some point and hung awkwardly from one hinge. This room had been ransacked, documents destroyed, and furniture flipped. But after that, there were no more closed or locked doors, and everything was in generally serviceable condition. The royal guard came down in a good mood, and Alexis heard Liz and Beth joking as they began to sort through the kitchen wares that had been left behind. They had put in so much effort to get everything that they needed, but when they got here, they found that not even the dishware had been destroyed. Once the house was clean and the bedding replaced, they could properly host an entire festival here and not be short on any of the essential kitchenware. If anything, they might have overpacked for their new household. However, they would be able to gift some of the excess to new arrivals, or use it to equip the homes of the master smith and the carpenter. Neither of them had brought much with them, and there were no nearby homes intact for them to move into even if they had. The closest homes were in the village, a few hundred meters away. But eventually, they would surely want their own space. Dominic stepped outside when John and his wife stepped outside to inspect the wood on the outside of the building. "John, a moment before you get to work." Dominic greeted him. "Yes, my lord. How can I help?" "About your wife. I suspect that she's going to need more than just a change of scenery to recover. She doesn't act without direct orders anymore, and she definitely needs the rest. So I will suggest that she is put on bed rest. Once she is recovered, she can start working again, but it would be best that we not push her." Dominic informed him. John nodded. "I realized earlier, my lord. I swear she won't cause trouble. But she gets anxious if she doesn't have anything to do. Please don't shut her away in a room. I don't think she would survive a month of bed rest." Dominic frowned in agreement. He wasn't sure that she would make it a month either way. "All right, if you think that it's best, she can help the others to clean the house. Anything that is rotted needs to be removed, and then we can start on remaking beds. The existing ones here are made of wool and animal furs. I don't know how well they will have survived the years. He offered. That got the carpenter's wife suddenly moving again, headed inside. John frowned, then shrugged. If it makes her feel useful, it's fine. I saw some of the beds already, and the top layer needs to be taken out and beaten to get the dust out, but other than that, they should be good enough for now. Whatever magic lingers on this house has prevented any mold from forming. Well, we've got more than enough new linen to make the beds. Give the ladies time, and they'll have the place presentable again. Now, did you find anything that might be a safety issue? Dominic asked. The carpenter shook his head. No, my lord. The house was made to last, and the roof was designed to be constructed without nails. The wood hasn't decayed much, and the attic was well ventilated, so any damaged wood is purely cosmetic. Excellent. They could sleep soundly tonight once they cleaned a few rooms. Chapter 222. Goats and Cats. Dominic was about to head back inside when movement in the garden caught his attention. A small group of goats was munching on the few vegetables that were still growing wild in the garden, unmaintained for years. Those were likely the manor's livestock to begin with, but if there were more around, they could send the royal guard to gather them and either herd them into one of the barns, or just lure them into staying nearby with food. There was more than enough hay growing in the fields for that. The goats were happy to switch from the hay fields to the carrots in the garden for the day, and Dominic wondered just how wild goats got if there were no people around. He had never seen them without the attention of a farmer, so he had no idea if they were actually an aggressive species. Pigs left to go wild became a true menace after all. The question was answered for him when he took out a cookie to snack on, and the goats simply walked over to see if what he had was worth eating. They seemed to be eyeing his horns, as if trying to decide if he was the strangest form of goat that they had ever seen. But most of their attention was on the cookie. They were not a fan of John, though. Even though he also had snacks, in the form of a biscuit from Beth, they decided it would be better to ram him to the ground, then steal the biscuit and stomp on him until Dominic came to rescue the fallen carpenter and pass out more cookies. Once they had their snack, the goats retreated to the barn, and Dominic chuckled in amusement. This might be easier than I was expecting, but I should go and see what the interior of the barn looks like. I don't know if the animals were turned loose or taken by the Dago's army. You should get someone to look at those bruises. And remind the others that the goats are somewhat domesticated and not to be hunted. John bowed, then limped back into the house, while Beth quietly laughed at his failed attempt to feed the animals. Dominic walked to the barn and found that not only were there no animal remains in it, the entire place was suspiciously clean, as if someone had been tending it or the door had just been opened. There were dozens of goats inside, young and old, but they didn't panic at the sight of Dominic. Definitely still domestic. There should be a goat herder somewhere nearby. Dominic caught the scent of something that was living, but not a goat, as he moved through the barn. But after a few minutes of searching, he still hadn't found it. That must mean it was above him, in the hay loft. Dominic silently climbed the ladder, then crept between the bales, not wanting to scare off whatever was here. However, what he found was not a person. A blink cat, a type of magical feline beast, stared back at him from the far side of the loft. Its eyes were intelligent and sharp, then eager when Dominic brought out a slice of cured ham from a Dago's ration pack. "Have you been looking after the goats?" Dominic asked, hoping that the friendly tone would make the cat less wary of him. But to his surprise, the cat nodded and turned to look at a magical device on the wall of the hay loft. Dominic gave the cat a second chunk of ham, then went to inspect the device. It was just a collection of levers, but clearly marked in aged brass. Clean out rotor, hay drop, hay load. Each of the lever sets operated a conveyor that performed an essential task of the barn. Someone would still have to muck out the stalls if they were in use, but there was a system on the floor to sweep the mess away and dump it on the ground outside, where it could compost or be used as fertilizer. The others moved hay bales around. Most of the loft was still full, so it hadn't been used much. But that explained the state of the barn's lower level. The blink cat had adopted the goats and had been keeping the barn clean for them to live in. Dominic didn't even know that the creatures were intelligent enough to operate the mechanisms, but there wasn't another easy explanation, unless there was actually a goat herder around here who had decided not to touch the house for some reason. Dominic spent a minute petting the cat, then left it some more meat and returned to the main floor of the barn. Ella, of the Royal Guard, was standing at the door, looking annoyed. "Lord Dominic, can you call off the attack goats? I came to see if there was any farm equipment left in the barn,"
she asked.
Dominic shrugged. "Probably not. I don't actually know anything about raising goats. But let me check the barn. There is a door on the other side, which leads to the equipment shed, and not the animal barn. You could have started with that. I swear these things are trained to go for the kneecaps," she muttered. Dominic chuckled as he patted the closest pair of goats on the head and went to inspect the back of the barn. The tack room was still stocked, and Dominic made sure to latch the door behind him so the goats didn't get in. Then he entered the equipment shed side of the barn and gasped in appreciation of the sight. In front of him was a single small steam tractor and a handful of tractor-pulled implements. A swather for cutting hay, a baler, a tiller for mulching the earth for the garden plots better than a plow could do, and even a wagon with folding sides to load produce or hay bales on. The water was all evaporated from the boiler, but that was easy to fix, and the tractor's furnace reacted smoothly to Dominic's manna when he tried to heat it. "It looks like we've got what we need for the hay and the garden. We can make someone cut and bale hay tomorrow. It might be enough to make the goats like them," Dominic joked as Ella walked in. "They really didn't touch anything on the estate all these years, and nothing has been moved or looted," she agreed. "Almost like the locals all thought it was cursed," she thought to herself. Chapter 223. Inherited Benefits. "Well, at least we can offer this much to the staff we're hiring. Tenna will be happy to know that there is a proper garden, even if it's overgrown. We've got a tiller to make nice, soft soil for next spring, and plenty of field growth to bale feed for the animals," Dominic happily informed the guardswoman. "That is a good point. With this much, we might not have to go to the city with an extra truck to get vegetables in the spring. I know that we pack seeds, but I didn't have high hopes," Ella replied. "Actually, the gardens here used to be grown on a 3-section cycle. It doesn't get cold enough that the garden won't grow, and there should be enough water even in the dry season to keep the garden going. So you can just plant every few months. If we harvest a portion now and replant it, we can start the process over," Dominic suggested. "I will talk to Tenna. She should know best," Ella agreed. She had grown up in the capital. Forget a whole garden. She hadn't ever even tried growing flowers. Jasmine, their farrier, came out to the barn as Dominic was inspecting the farming equipment, and Dominic heard her playing with the goats. "Well, I'm not the only one they like, at least," he joked. "Good thing, too. Those beasts are a menace," Ella agreed. "Ah, Lord Dominic, I see that there are no horses left, but we've got goats. I will work on the fences over the next few days to keep predators out so they can roam safely." Jasmine greeted them. "We will get horses eventually. I swear we didn't call you here to do nothing. But you're skilled at the forge, so there will be more than enough work even without them. There is a blink cat upstairs, and it knows how to operate the barn's Magitech equipment. So, watch out for moving floor sections and falling hay bales," Dominic warned. Both women looked up, and Dominic saw the cat staring down at them, one paw on a brass lever. That was the one for the floor clean-out, Dominic knew, not one that would drop a hay bale. But the cat was not at all embarrassed to have been caught. Or it might have been taunting them. Either way, he should likely warn people about all the exposed gears, mechanisms, and pistons that were in the barn. Safety hadn't been a primary concern because only people who belonged in the barn would ever enter, so there were no guards on the exposed mechanisms. Besides, covering them wouldn't look as cool. "Let's head back to the house. The goats look like they're fine for now, and the garden can be tended once Tenna is ready." "How much of what is inside will we have to move out?" Dominic asked. Ella shrugged. "Not much. We brought new essentials, and that will replace the damaged items on the first floor, plus any of the beds that are more than just musty with age. But other than that, most of the house should be salvageable once we get it all cleaned. The girls are started on the main floor first so that the kitchen and common areas aren't too bad. Then they will work on the bedrooms quickly before dinner. The guards are already doing the basic cleaning of the bedrooms on the top floor, and there is a spare room where they will put anything that they aren't using. The hard part will be getting all the new furniture upstairs. Dominic knew that she didn't mean physically. They all had physical enhancement gems that would be at least at level 10, giving them double their natural strength. If they physically couldn't carry a piece of furniture up the stairs with 2 royal guards, it was never intended to be on an upper floor. The trucks were quickly being unloaded, so Dominic joined in, bringing supplies to the pantry, where he handed it to Liz for sorting, or to the basement, where Beth was organizing all the bulk goods and extra items for storage. The king had sent them enough to make it through a season before the crops would be coming in, not knowing that there was actually enough already here that they wouldn't have to worry about it. I just wish that we had some milk. Not much fancy baking to be done without it. Beth sighed as Dominic brought down a pair of flour sacks. There are cans of condensed milk, but I would suggest that you talk to the goats. There are a bunch of them out at the barn, with a blink cat looking over them. If one of them is still lactating from a recent birth, you might be able to get a steady supply of goat milk. Dominic suggested. Beth frowned. Goat milk and cow milk weren't quite the same flavor. But until they could get a rancher to move here, goats would be more than enough. They had brought chickens as well, so they wouldn't run out of eggs. But the first few months would be lean no matter what, or so she assumed. Dominic moved to explore the basement, checking it for any issues that the others might have missed. One section of wall stood out to him, being slightly wrong in color compared to the others. He placed his hand on it, wondering if it was a moisture issue, or if it was just a mismatched patch job. However, when he touched it, the stone vanished and revealed a large panel of magical runes and Magitech orbs set into bronze. Well now, what do we have here? Dominic muttered to himself as he read the runes. We've got lights, fireplaces, and a whole set of repair orbs for the house. Now, that is convenient. I can't believe these are still here and undamaged. I thought for sure they would have been destroyed before the manor fell. Perhaps because they were hidden nobody bothered? Well, now I can save some time and money. He narrated to himself as he added mana to the various orbs. Curses rang through the house, and Dominic turned the fireplaces back off. Oops. Guess I should have warned someone about that. I hope I didn't damage anything important. Probably not. Who stored things in the fireplace? Chapter 224. Spring Cleaning. Beth shook her head. You really can't help yourself, can you? Typical mage, you see a magical item. You just have to poke it and see what it does. She admonished. I fixed all the windows and structural damage, though. Plus, the lights are on again. That's got to count for something. Dominic replied. The lights are not on. Beth informed him in a dry tone, with a gesture toward the orb on the ceiling. Dominic reached up and pulled the brass chain, and the orb lit up with bright white light. I should say, the lights are working. It was just turned off. It looks like we really aren't going to have to do much to live here. It's just the farms and the village houses that will be real work. Beth smiled. You've got time for that, my lord. We're not even settled into the manor yet. It will be a week or 2 before we're even ready to start thinking about bringing anyone to the farms, and longer before there is a need for villagers. Dominic chuckled. I will work on the yard for the next few days, getting everything set up, then on the closest farmhouses. We've got John to do the extra structure, since I didn't manage to find any Magitech orbs for creating wood. The cook laughed. Well, I doubt that you would. There are some spells to make plants grow faster, but growing entire trees isn't really what Magitech specializes in. Just cut some down, and let him cut them to size for the roof trusses. With his years of practice, I'm sure he won't have any issues hanging roof sheeting. Thatch might be a skilled trade, but with a bit of magic, getting copper roofing to stay on the roof shouldn't be hard. Only 2 hours after they had arrived, the trucks were empty, and everything was put in something resembling its proper spot. The storage rooms were packed with old mattresses and a few worn-out or damaged pieces that had been replaced with new furniture, while the main floor had been given a basic cleaning. There was a huge pile of dust and dirt outside the back door, and more under all the windows, as the guardsmen had simply dumped their dustpans out of them as they prepared the bedrooms. Dinner was cooking, and Beth was in a much better mood. But now it was time for the hard part. Tenna wanted to go out and assess the garden, as well as the chances of getting milk from any of the goats. goats that had likely never been handled by humans before. A pair of large billies came out to stare at the stout gardener as she moved through the vegetable patch, humming in annoyance at all the partially grown plants that had been eaten. I don't think that the goats spend much time around the garden. They would have killed everything if they did. They might have been kept nearby by a goat herd. If you can find that person, we might have our first official resident, she explained. Dominic nodded. All right, I will search for signs before dinner. If I find anything, I will look for them tomorrow. As if answering his thoughts, the deep howl of a dire wolf echoed through the woods, calling to its pack. If there was anyone living nearby, Dominic hoped that the house was sturdy. At the sound of the howling, the goats retreated into the barn, and Dominic watched as the Blink cat rammed the door shut from the outside and dropped the bar. I think that we found our rancher. He chuckled as the cat leapt from board to board, returning to the top floor of the barn. Dire wolves didn't tend to be smarter than average animals, and they wouldn't think to lift the bar and pull the door open. They would simply ram it, trying to get in until they gave up and went looking for other prey. Today would be a good day for meat if the wolves came looking. They had plenty of rifles, and with a bit of time to stew, even dire wolf was edible. Nobody had missed the sound of howling, and Dominic saw that the guards had swung all the third-floor windows open to wait with their rifles ready. They had a clear line of sight all around the manor house, including to the barn. As long as the wolves came close enough, the problem would be solved. Beth rushed back into the house, all desire to check the gardens gone. But Dominic waited outside, giving the predators a target out in the open. He had a pistol in his hand as he listened to the howls get closer. 6 wolves, he decided. A full pack, not a female and cubs. The wolves came out of the tree line, stalking silently toward Dominic as they spread out to prevent his escape. When they got to 30 paces away, too far from the trees to make an easy escape, Dominic raised his pistol, and the crack of rifles being fired echoed from the house. All 6 wolves dropped in under a second, and he didn't even fire a single round. From the hayloft, the Blink cat watched the action with a look of smug superiority and then returned inside, out of sight. The royal guard checked the grounds out all of the windows and then came out to clean and dress the bodies so they could be hung and cured for storage. Excellent work, Lord Sorcerer. The wolves really did think that you were alone against them. Even the cat was laughing. Colonel Wilkes joked as he picked up one of the dire wolves to drag it to what they hoped was the smoke shack. If it wasn't, they were going to have to find one because without magical refrigeration, they were going to need to cure all the meat or most would spoil before they could even start setting up the kitchen to make stew and can it for storage. The house did have a cold storage room. They just hadn't realized it yet because Dominic had only turned it on a few moments ago and it wasn't frozen inside yet. Chapter 2:25. House functions online. The small shed was a smokehouse, complete with decade-old cured ham hanging from hooks. Those were moved outside, and the guards got to work preparing most of the wolves, while one was prepared for immediate use. Alexis stood on the back porch when Dominic returned to the house, with her rifle leaned against the wall beside her. This is a good sign. The first afternoon here, and the estate has already provided its first meat for us. In fact, other than one minor issue with a burnt maid when the fireplaces suddenly came back to life, everything has been remarkably well preserved. Dominic gave her a sheepish look. That might have been my fault. I activated the magical systems in the house and forgot that some of the fireplaces might have been active when the house ran out of mana. But on the bright side, we don't need to worry about firewood, not even in the kitchen. It doesn't get horribly cold here overnight, but during the rainy season, some of the nights can get pretty cool and damp. We got a few days of frost and sometimes a day with snow during the winters when I was young, so we will definitely enjoy the magical fireplaces. Beth came out with a cleaver in her hand. I'm already enjoying the magical stoves. To think that the manor had a central control panel for all the magical devices, it's wonderful. I will add more mana as we need it, but the stove is working amazingly well. Dominic nodded. With the fireplaces off, what I put in should last for days. Oh, that reminds me, there is a freezer in the basement. I remember that they used to keep ice cream in it for the kids. I don't know if it's working, I didn't see controls for it. They might be somewhere else in the basement. The manor had minor magic everywhere, but my memories of it are faint. I just wasn't interested in finding out about most of it. But as a kid, the ice cream was important. I remember that part. I even remember what shelf it was on. Beth nodded. I found the freezer. There was a label on the door. It still needs some cleaning before it can be used. Right, a freezer that had been turned off for a decade, but never emptied, was likely to be absolutely vile inside. Once the meat was hung, and the fire lit in the smokehouse, the guardsmen returned to see what Beth had ready for dinner. Dire Wolf is only good when spiced and stewed for hours, so no steaks for you. But I've got hot ham sandwiches and mashed potatoes with gravy. A bit simple, but it is ready, she explained. The guard shrugged. Sounds good to us. As long as you remembered to pack the pickles and mustard. The cook laughed. How long have I been a palace cook? As if I don't know your favorites by now. Of course I did. I've got enough of both to last us through half a year. But I see that there are cucumbers in the garden, so we can start making more pickles soon. She had set the food out on a platter on the large dining room table, along with a large pot of vegetable soup and more biscuits, as the soft and fluffy dinner buns needed more time to prepare. Interestingly to Dominic, the table was actually a Magitech item, and it had warming plates set into it, where Beth had set the soup and the covered platter of sandwiches. He would have to study them later to add the item to his repertoire of blueprints. It shouldn't be too complex to make an item to warm a metal plate, as the method was already included in the introduction to magical engineering that he had learned in the palace. But he still wanted to know how they had done it here. For the next few weeks or months, he might be incredibly busy as the new duke. But after that, Dominic was certain that he would have time to join Pops at the forge and continue to develop his skills. Once dinner was done, with everyone in the house eating at the same table, Alexis led Dominic up to their new room. The mattress had been replaced by one from the trucks, which was slightly smaller than the frame was intended for. Other than that one oddity, the room had been fully cleaned, and even the bathtub and shower appeared to be clean and serviceable. Dominic put his hand on the controls and pushed some mana in, then smiled as the whirring of a pump and the burble of moving water informed him that the spells were working properly. It took a minute for the water cistern on the wall to heat, but once it was going, it should provide constant hot water for the shower. Crossing his fingers for luck, Dominic turned the shower on and waited as it spit out some accumulated crud before flowing clean and warm. Your Highness, the bath might need to wait for tomorrow, but there is a warm shower waiting for you, he informed Alexis with a smirk. She just rolled her eyes at his smug expression. You act as if you made all this wonderful Magitech and didn't just inherit it. Possession is 9/10 of the law, right? But a warm shower is better than nothing. Let me have this little victory of managing to get the house back online. You go first. If it doesn't kill you or give you a rash, I'll go second. Alexis agreed. That was fair. She was the one with the healing magic, after all. But the lines were pulling pure water from the well under the manor, and after it had run for a moment, the shower was a welcome end to a long day of travel and exploration of the new property. Well, almost the end of the day. He still had some intentions for his lovely bride once she got out of the shower, and they would need time. And possibly a second shower. Chapter 226, Morning at Home. Dominic cracked his eyes open the next morning and immediately regretted not replacing the curtains in the bedroom before going to bed. Roll back on your side. You were blocking the sun, Alexis complained. Dominic chuckled and pulled the blanket over her head. We should get up and get started on the to-do list. Alexis sighed. All right, but only because I know that it needs to be done. I will start with the house and yard area. You head to the surrounding farms and the village to see what is salvageable and make a plan to get it rebuilt. Dominic nodded. He needed to see the sites for himself and inspect some of the houses, as they might still have valuable items inside if they hadn't been looted. His parents weren't the only ones in town that specialized in magical devices. They were more generalized in their work, but there was a smithy in town and a Magitech carriage repairman next to the inn and tavern. Those were standard for nearly every village in Wavemates, and they were especially important in the border villages a decade ago, when Signia was still adapting to mostly Magitech transportation. Not all the convoys would have a skilled repairman with them, so they would need to stop and get parts made, or ask advice from a carriage maker on the specialty parts that didn't usually break. But the problem was just as bad for Wavemate's convoys headed into Signia at the time, as they were simply unable to get parts that they weren't carrying and had to improvise until they could limp home. So, border towns could make a killing off damaged caravans if they had skilled workers. Putting off the inevitable, Dominic headed for the village first. The houses didn't actually look too bad. About half of them had been gutted by fire, but the stone walls were still partially intact. But the others looked like they hadn't been touched at all. Doors stood open, curtains flapped in windows. Even the ever-present field mice could be seen scurrying around the village, occasionally chased by feral cats. All signs of a healthy village, if there were any people left here. Skipping the first few houses, which had been burnt, Dominic stepped up into an intact home. There were still dishes on the table, complete with the bones of what would have been a roast chicken. The rodents had quickly cleaned the majority of the leftovers, leaving only bones. But the house looked mostly intact. Dominic spotted a weapons rack by the door, with room for 4 blades, but no weapons in them, though a scabbard was laying discarded on the floor. The family here must have had older sons. The next house was similar, but without the weapons rack. Empty, but looking ready to move into, with minimal repairs needed. There were many more burnt houses on this side of town, and Dominic paused, remembering the last time that he had seen this area. If he turned toward the center of town, yes, there it was, the battle site. The bones of dozens of Dago's soldiers remained on the ground, along with most of the remains of the villagers. Nobody had been here since the village was wiped out, and very little had been touched. Even the weapons were still lying in skeletal hands. Dominic slowly walked through the central market, letting memories replay in his mind. There, on his right, Dominic stepped into the old smithy, where he was met by the protective growl of an aging hunting dog, guarding its offspring. "Hey girl, it's just me. Surely, you remember your old friend Dominic?" he asked. When he was a kid, there wasn't a single hunting dog that he wasn't on a first-name basis with, as they were all in the woods all day, every day. At the sound of his voice, the dog tilted its head, old memories surfacing. Dominic took out a bit of meat and crouched to be less threatening as he offered it to the formerly well-trained hunting animal as he made a scratching motion with his other hand, the signal that he wanted to pet the dog. The familiar gesture made the dog's growl stop, and it quickly snatched the meat for the pups, which were being watched over by a younger female, while 4 more young adult dogs stood between him and the young. Dominic tossed them all a bit more meat, and then brought out one last bit for the one who might remember him. Cutter. That was the dog's name. It had taken him a bit, as the patterns had faded in her coat just as much as in his memory. "Good girl, Cutter. You've watched the village until I returned. Do you want to come back to the manor?" Dominic asked, not expecting the dog to respond. He just wanted to calm it down so he didn't get jumped as he cleared the village. But Cutter came up to him and bumped his legs, looking for affection. Dominic rubbed her head, then brought out a coarse brush, intended for buffing leather and soft metals, to brush out her coat. That brought happy panting from the muscular canine, and gave Dominic time to assure himself that the forge itself was functional and mostly complete. If he activated the pumps and the flames spell gem, it should light right up, ready for use. Even the torch tanks in the corner of the room looked untouched by time, other than the layer of dust on them. Dominic rose to his feet and patted Cutter on the back. "Well, girl, I need to see how the rest of town looks. Are you coming or staying with your pups?" he asked. Cutter moved to his left heel in ready position, nose forward. "All right, you watch for threats. I will check the houses." In total, there were nearly 40 houses still intact, while the rest of the village had been sacked and burned, which left Dominic with only cleanup work to do before he headed into the woods to check out the state of the outlying cabins. One of them might have had someone living in it since the war. Even if superstition kept everyone away from the village and manor, the houses in the woods used to host regular travelers who were passing through on foot. If you couldn't afford a night at the inn, but needed food, the hunters and woodcutters were normally happy to help. In exchange for days' work, of course. Chapter 227. First Residence. Dominic finished with the village and chuckled at the procession behind him, all emulating Cutter's actions. From the look of it, the hunting dog had done her best to train her offspring what she knew. So, As Dominic headed for the woods, they spread out around him, looking for game. The first few hunters' houses were abandoned, shut tight against the elements, as the residents were working at the time of the attack. But at the first of the woodcutters' houses, Dominic saw his first signs of inhabitants. Not human, he realized as he got closer. The scent that he got was that of troll mixed with humans. There was a hunting dog in the yard, lounging in the sun. But it perked up when it saw Cutter and came running over to playfully bump against her and give Dominic a curious sniff. Dominic ruffled the fur on its head and heard grumbling from inside. Worst guard dog ever, that one. A man's voice complained. Dominic laughed. Not necessarily. I am Dominic Wavemates, the Duke of Westover. I've just moved back into the manor with my wife and staff, and I grew up a few kilometers south of here in the woods. The techno-wizard's place, if you know it. An ugly young man came outside with a lumber axe in his hand, and Dominic nodded politely. Dragonkin? Well, I can't say that I expected that. What are your intentions with this place? The half-trollish man asked. To bring residents back and revive the estate. If you want to stay right where you are, I don't object. What is it that you do for work? Or have you just been surviving? Dominic asked. The man laughed. I hate to be the one to tell you, but simply surviving is more than most trollish sorcerers manage. It's not like we've got a noble lineage or plentiful magic. My dad was a forest troll, though. I've been here with my wife for almost a year now, and we're expecting our first. Though, with the Dago's occupation, I didn't dare to do anything but enchant the garden at the house. That village is cursed. The aura of death is so strong on it that nothing dares to approach. Even when I come close, it gives me the creeps, like the lingering magic might strip my very soul. From the house, a heavily pregnant, apparently human, woman emerged. You said you're the new Duke of Westover? And your name is Wavemates? She asked. That's right. The nephew of the former Earl of Westover, who ran the manor. This land was ceded to Signia after the recent battles with Dagos, and the king allowed me to take over my old home. Dominic explained. The woman smiled. In that case, my husband has the healing magic of the forest trolls, and I'm a skilled midwife. We used to live outside of Coster, but a little over a year ago, the Dagos nobles started purging the non-humans living in the slums, and we decided it was better to move on. Before that, I had been a midwife for 5 years. Dominic nodded. That's a valuable skill for any village. I see that you're capable of taking care of your own garden, and you've made the house a home. So it's yours. If you need repairs, just ask. I have magic for many situations, and I'm planning to renovate the village after I bury the dead properly. Is there anyone else living nearby that I should know of? The woman shook her head, but the troll tapped at his chin. There is the blink cat in the barn at the manor, and her goats. You've met the dogs, and they seem to like you. But without magic, no human would dare to get this close to the village. It might just be because you are present that your people aren't bothered. Like you belong here, and so do they because you said so? He suggested. The way that curses worked, it was quite possible that he was right. All right. I will check the other outlying houses to see which ones are still suitable to have woodcutters or hunters move into them. Then I will check the farmhouses. Dominic explained. I would come with you, but June is close to her due date, and I will be needed. You can call me Larry, my lord. Never got a family name, not once mother saw my face for the first time. He replied. Good to meet you, Larry, June. If there are issues, come to the manor. I've got a whole group of royal paladins with me, and they've got healing magic plus first aid training. I don't know that any of them are trained to birth children, but they are good with healing wounds. Dominic was about to leave when the woman gave a nervous cough. My lord, if you're taking over the estate, does that mean we owe taxes? Dominic chuckled. The King of Signia has granted a general amnesty to my estate for 2 years. So you won't have any outstanding tax debts for at least that long. If the village grows well, there won't be much owing at all. I intend to hire some craftsmen to produce goods under my employment. The intention is that the sale of those goods will be enough to fund the estate, with only a minimal amount of taxation going from the residents to the crown every year. Certainly, not more than a standard Wavemates empire tithe. The pair smiled at that. The tax rate under the wavemates was simple for the most part. The land all belonged to the lord, so a quarter of the production did as well. A quarter of the chopped wood, a quarter of the crop. But for the residents of the town, their actual tax payment was usually in the form of free services for the manor. A quarter of their time, while the lord paid for materials for their orders. It worked out very well, and the wealthier merchants or businessmen would make a direct deal to pay cash taxes instead of dedicating time to the nobility. Chapter 2:28. Check the outskirts. Dominic left the couple, with most of the hunting dogs following. The one who had been in their yard remained, along with one of the younger males. But after a few minutes, the second animal caught up to the group. A low bark warned Dominic that there was game nearby, and Dominic crouched to follow Cutter through the woods without drawing too much attention. A large group of Axbridge antelope were in the clearing, oblivious to the danger around them. Perfect for restocking the pantry. Arcane Blast severed the spine of one of the larger males, and the others scattered, leaving Dominic to collect his prize. It was good that he had gotten monster strength in spell gem form to put in his grimoire, because the antelope weighed close to 250 kilos, even after he had gutted it for the dogs to split the unwanted organs and offal among themselves. "All right, let's go home," he informed Cutter, and turned toward the manor. He could check on his old home and the other houses later. The dogs all followed him back, then lay down in the yard under the awning of the horse shelter, out of the direct sun. "Lord Dominic, I see that you made new friends." Beth laughed as she saw Dominic covered in blood, carrying an antelope and followed by hunting dogs. Alexis came out to see what the commotion was, and smiled at the sight of Dominic looking like a village huntsman. Legacy hunting dog, who survived the battle. And her offspring, of course. They're friendly enough, so we might as well keep them here in the manor. They'll help give warning of attacks. They found the antelope for me today. There is only one couple living in the woods, a trollish sorcerer, half human. Plus his human wife. She's pregnant, but they don't have any other kids yet. She says she's a midwife, so I told her we'd help her if she needed anything. The village will need cleaning, but there are enough houses left for us to get started. The farms are also mostly intact. The houses were raided, but none of them were burned. The land needs a lot of work to get going again, but I think that between myself and Pops, we can likely make enough farm equipment for the job by the end of the year. Dominic relayed. "You are busy. The house is ready in all the essential areas. The first batch of food has been pulled from the garden so that the rotation can be restarted." Jasmine took the tractor out to cut and bale the hay field for the goats, who seem happy in the barn. The door is open, but they're mostly inside. Tenna wants a new wall around the garden to keep other wildlife away. Not that walls work on goats, but they should keep some of the rodent and pest population out of the garden. We've been purging the house of mice, but the local cat is not cooperative. She doesn't want to come inside. Alexis informed him. Dominic laughed. Blink cats didn't eat mice. I will try to find some feral kittens in the village to be tamed as mousers. He offered. That will be good. But other than that, all we need now is a population to fill the property. How badly looted are the buildings? Alexis asked. They're not. At all. There's a curse of some sort over the area that has scared everyone away. The soldiers in the village still have their weapons and equipment laying next to them. The plates from the villagers' last meal are still on the table, and the kettles on the stoves. Once I have given everyone a proper burial, I think that the curse should break. Then we might have to worry about looters, but by then, we should have everything of value stored away. John will be busy, as 2/3 of the village was burned. But the farms are good, and 1/3 of the village is fully intact. Overall, it's better than anyone could have hoped. Dominic explained. All right, come in for lunch, and you can have half the men to go start clearing the village after. Do you have a plan? Alexis replied. Dominic nodded. I do. Think that a pair of mass graves and a memorial will be just what we need. If someone has magic for moving earth, it shouldn't be too hard. Or, I can use the Fieldstone Wall spell to build a memorial crypt. Beth nodded when he said that. The crypt is the best option. Separate the bones into 2 chambers and leave it as a memorial to the battle so that nobody ever forgets what happened here. Graves flatten over time, and their stories are forgotten. but a well-built crypt will last centuries. All right, then that is what I will do. With 6 of us and a wagon or 2, we should be able to collect all the bones and sort out the equipment that is still usable after a decade. No, on second thought, we will put it all in the crypt. It's a bit more dignified to settle the soldiers in uniform. Dominic agreed. That also meant that they could use a few storage rings to pick everything up and then transfer it to the crypt. No need for sorting damaged gear, just clean up. Beth returned to the house, and then returned with a large copper pushcart. Put the animal on there. There is a wet room for butchering that has a dumbwaiter that goes to the freezer. I will make a roast for dinner, she explained. Dominic placed the animal on the cart and then turned to walk around the side of the house. Where are you going? Alexis asked. There is an outside shower for days like this. I will wash and change before I come back inside, Dominic explained. Someone follow him. I don't recall seeing that anywhere on the list of house amenities. Alexis replied with a sigh. Too many things were hidden around the house, only to be revealed by chance or by someone who knew what they were looking for. Chapter 229. Peaceful Rest. Dominic went to the horse shelter and put a bit of manna into the pump to start the shower. It was just cold water, but for the stable hands, who had been out in the heat all day, that was not a drawback. I thought that was for watering horses. Jasmine laughed as she saw Dominic walking out of the shelter with dripping hair. Horses, stable hands, pretty much anything that fits under the shower head. The dogs are a big fan of it on hot days as well. But it's best not to leave it running all the time so that you don't deplete the well. Dominic agreed. The farrier nodded, making her long braid flip over her shoulders. Personally, I would have just used the servant's entrance and the shower there. Dominic shrugged. I like this one. It doesn't have hot water, but the fresh air is a nice change. Lunch was a properly fancy meal today, now that they had time to pick fresh vegetables from the garden. Well, fancy was a relative term. Lunch was typically a light meal, but Beth had made some sort of cucumber salad sandwiches with vegetable stew, cold meat cuts, and cheese. Once that was done, Dominic led a handful of the royal guard into the village to prepare for the cleanup. What do you think, boss? You make the crypt. We will use empty rings to pick up all the bones. We can have different people do the villagers and the soldiers so they don't get mixed up. If you'd like, I'll do the soldiers, they'll do the villagers. Colonel Wilkes suggested. I would reverse that. There are a lot more dead soldiers in the area in and around the village than there were villagers. Dominic informed him.
Right.
Forgot that this wasn't a defenseless village. The leader of the Royal Guard team replied. Dominic just shrugged. Mostly they were. Except around the manor itself, the real carnage hadn't started until he had arrived after the villagers were dead. Don't forget to clear the woods near the village. Some of that used to be open ground, and there will be bodies all over, he added. Then he headed for an open area on the edge of town, where the kids used to play in the grass when they didn't want to go to the sports field. That was a good spot for the memorial, so Dominic used fieldstone wall to create a stone floor, then 3 stone walls and a central dividing wall, so that the 2 forces could rest in peace. He would close in the front and build a roof once they had all the skeletons inside, and he knew that they weren't going to run out of space. Even if most of them were enemy soldiers, they still died here and deserved to be properly buried. It wasn't long before the soldiers came to the site with full rings and ashen faces. There are so many bodies. They're just everywhere. You can't walk without having to check the ground for bones. I can't guarantee that all these bones were people. Some might have been animals that the hunting dogs killed. But I only picked up skeletons with the remains of Dago's army equipment and bones that were too close to them to tell them apart. The first guard to return explained. That works for me. Just pile them in the larger side as neatly as possible. If the official reports are right, there should be at least 1,000 soldiers in the immediate area, and then 100 and some villagers. Dominic explained. Load after load of skeletons were laid within the crypt, carefully piled in layers along the walls. For hours later, they were fairly sure that the houses were empty and that there were no more skeletons laying on the surface out in the open. They would come back and look a few more times before the first villagers arrived, but already the village felt a bit less creepy. Less like an open-air mausoleum and more like a ghost town. We're going to need clay. Can someone go grab some from the pit on the east side of town? I will lay it out and use clay to copper to make the doors. I won't seal them yet, in case we find more occupants, but we should at least close it against the elements. Dominic explained once the work was done. Of course. You make a nice domed roof for that out of stone, and we will get you the clay for the doors. Making the rest of the building was easy, and Dominic built the front wall to have a double door, right where the dividing wall was, so that it would be impossible to batter the doors inward. History had taught him that it didn't matter what the building was intended to be. During an invasion, the locals would go for any secure fortification that they could find. The men watered the clay before they brought a whole wheelbarrow full to the crypt. That let them dump and smooth it with ease, while Dominic grabbed a few handfuls to shape into the hinges set into the walls. The pins would be molded into the doors, which Dominic quickly drew a simple decorative design around the edge of. It wasn't much, but it was better than a plain copper door. The spell converted the doors to pure copper, and all 6 men immediately realized their mistake. A 10-centimeter thick copper door was heavy. Not just a little bit heavy, either. In the end, it took all 6 of them and some leverage to get each of the doors in place and hung. But they could say for certain that nobody was getting through those easily once they were closed and locked. Good work, gentlemen. Let's go see what Miss Beth has whipped up for dinner. We've gotten more done on the first day than I thought that we would, and I would say that we've earned our keep. Dominic joked. Bringing the best cook was a good call. Colonel Wilkes agreed. Chapter 230. Odd Layout. When they got back to the manor, Dominic found that the table was set for 13, and the dinner was waiting on them to finish. The rest of the staff, including Cutter the hunting dog, were eating in the kitchen at the servants' table. So it was just Dominic, Alexis, Pops, and the royal guard in the main room. That was proper etiquette, he knew. But the main dining room did feel entirely too large for so few people. Did you know that the house doesn't have a secondary informal dining room? Unless you count the table in the master suite, that is. Alexis noted as Dominic took his seat beside her. That is a bit odd. I wonder if the last occupant was big on formality? Or perhaps on family-style dining. The only place we ate when I visited as a youth was right at this table, but the whole extended family would be here for the big dinners. So I can't really speak to where they ate every other day. For all I know, they might have enjoyed secluded dining in the garden every evening. Dominic joked. Pops chuckled. That is a possibility. There are good stone tables out there. But I have a more important question first. Where am I going to set up my forge? There isn't space in the manor house, and it would take time to build an outbuilding with a full forge in it. Is there one in the village that survived the years? Dominic nodded. Yeah, the dogs had claimed it as their own. It's in good condition, and even the cutting torch was still standing in the corner of the room when I got there. I think that if you put in the work to clean it up, it shouldn't be a problem to get the old smithy working as your forge. The man who ran it before was a techno-wizard, so there might be some strange things in there, but probably nothing that a master smith can't figure out. Pops frowned. What sort of building is it? Dominic shrugged. 1/2 meter thick walls, made of fieldstone naturally. It has a steel girder roof truss and slate roof tiles. It's not big, but there is a small apartment beside it where the apprentice used to live when there was one. The smith himself lived in the house behind the forge. But that's burnt down now. We can put it near the top of the list for rebuilding, right after the houses that only need a little bit of work to make them ready for new residents. But it's only a few minutes walk back to the manor as well. Pops shrugged. I won't object to staying here, where Beth will cook all my meals. That was the very best thing about living in the palace. From the kitchen, Dominic could hear the cook laughing. Dwarves were the simplest of guests to cook for. As far as Pops was concerned, dinner only actually needed 3 ingredients: meat, potatoes, and ale. The ale could be both seasoning and beverage. Pops wouldn't mind. You could even use it instead of water to boil the potatoes. Once dinner was finished, everyone returned to their rooms early, worn out from a long day of cleaning and repairs. Dominic helped Alexis with her dress, which she hung in the shower room so that it wouldn't be unduly wrinkled when the maids went to clean it. It wasn't anything fancy, as she had also been working around the house all day, but the little details made everyone's life easier. You know, it's strange being a married man. I get all excited knowing that when I'm finished washing up for bed, you're going to be there and not an empty room. Dominic joked as he stepped out of the shower. Alexis looked him over from head to toe. I can't say that this is what I'm used to, either. There were always maids and servants around even when I was changing, but none quite so easy to look at. Dominic chuckled, and Alexis pulled something out of her storage ring. The tricorn hat from the pirate outfit that she had given him the other day. Let's head to bed. But keep the hat on. The sun through the window woke them up again the next morning, and Alexis grabbed the hat off the bedpost to cover her face. Curtains. The first thing that I'm doing today is replacing those curtains. I swear we had some in the stuff we brought. Dominic laughed as he stood up and stretched, loosening stiff muscles. Definitely curtains. And perhaps a nice rug. This room has a bit of an echo to it. He agreed. Once they were properly showered and dressed, Dominic led the way downstairs to the morning meeting, where everyone had their list of tasks that needed to be completed, set in something resembling a priority order. For Pops, the only item was to check the forge and assess what it needed to get ready to move in. For Jasmine, the farrier, it was the same, plus a few tasks around the barn that hadn't been completed yet. The household staff had a much longer list, while Tenna, the gardener they had hired, wanted a new wall built around the garden before anything else. That had been on the list yesterday as well, but they hadn't gotten to it. John made a list of tasks that he was needed for, in the order or priority that he found them, while Julio made a list of items that they didn't have and would need to bring to the estate. Most of his day would be helping with domestic repair tasks, and there was no shortage of those. Alexis' list started with bedroom curtains, while the royal guard wanted to start with taking out the old mattresses to beat them out and air them. The estate had quite a few guest rooms, but they weren't yet ready to receive guests. Having somewhere for visitors and new staff to sleep was priority one for them as long as the estate was secure.